Okay, good morning, everyone. On behalf of Navjivan Center for Development, I, Sanjay Vanani, would like to welcome you all on this morning. Today, we have taken the important subject where we are facing the day-to-day operational issues like GST for charitable trust and NGOs. And for discussion and detailed question and answer session, we have very eminent person, Chartered Accountant, Mr. Uchit Seth Sir. Uchit sir is BCom, ACA, LLB, and he's a seasoned scholar and also one of the great credentials, academic credential in his basket is sir has secured the 14th All India rank in Chartered Account Final Examination. Sir, congratulations. Sir is also secure the second rank uh, in ICAI and the third rank in LLB examination in Gujarat University. Sir also work with a very eminent person like Mr. V. Sridharan, Senior Advocate in Bombay High Court. C. Uchit Sir said he's also currently practice in the Gujarat High Court, the Supreme Court, and the Tribunal on the Taxation Matter with Mr. Nayan Sheth, Advocate in Ahmedabad. Sir is also appeared the various cases and from the various industries like Nirma Limited, Reliance Industry, Gujarat Consumer Product Limited. Sir is also become the very instrumental person in various landmark judgment from Gujarat High Court like Philco Trade Center Private Limited, Tractors and Farm Equipment Limited, West Coast Web Phase Private Limited, Reliance Industry Limited, Torrent Power, and so on. Sir is also awarded as the best article writer in the Celtex Journal published by the Gujarat Celtex Bar Associations for the year 2013-14. And Sir is also regularly writing in the various journals. Sir is also giving the lucid interpretation of various judgments, various definitions on GSTs and other act related to the industries. So, sir, on behalf of our all entire non-profit community, I would like to welcome you on board, and I hope that your session, your interaction with you, will definitely enlighten our community. Sir, over to you. Uchit sir, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vanani, for the wonderful introduction. Good morning, friends. Today, the object of this session is to have some clarity on the effect and applicability of the GST law on charitable trusts and non-profit organizations. Insofar as the businesses are concerned, as such, insofar as applicability of the law is concerned, there is not much of a doubt. GST per se is a law on business transactions. But insofar as charitable trusts are concerned, this question assumes immense significance as to whether they come within the purview and ambit of the GST law or not. So during the course of the session, we'll analyze whether or not GST is applicable, and if applicable, what are the safeguards and what are the procedures to be followed by a trust or a non-profit organization. So now let us start with the most important and crucial question of liability of registration under the GST law. Technically, if I cross the threshold in GST, then I become liable to registration. So now what is the threshold? The law says that if my turnover of goods exceeds 20 lakhs, or if my turnover of services exceeds 40 lakhs in a year, then I cross the threshold, I become liable for registration. What does the law mean by turnover? Turnover is an aggregate of values of the supplies made by a person. So if suppose I am a shop owner, I sell goods to people. If during the year, the sale price which I receive towards the goods exceeds rupees 20 lakhs, then I become liable for registration under the GST law. Sale as I said, there cannot be a doubt, it would be part of my turnover. Question is, if I am a charitable institution, if I am a non-profit organization, can the transaction which I undertake be treated to be a supply under the GST law? Because as I said, turnover is as such a total of the
good morning, sir.
supplies which I make, and therefore
પેલા બે મેસેજ સાહેબ મોકલ્યા હતા જરા એમાં તમે આમાં કોઈ પહેલો મેસેજ હતો પ્લેસમેન્ટ રિલેટેડ હતો કે ક્યાં ક્યાં જોબ મળે એવો ને એક આપણો ઓપન હાઉસ વાળો હતો તો જવા દઈએ ને તો કાલે ગોઠવો તો આજે બધા મેસેજ કરી
સંજયજી, yeah, I'm sorry, there was some disturbance I believe in the. Okay, so turnover is basically a total of the sale or the supply which a person makes. जो भी मैं सेल कर रहा हूं उसका एग्रीगेट मेरा टर्नओवर बनता है. प्रश्न ये है कि एज एन एनजीओ और एज अ चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट अगर मैं कोई ट्रांजैक्शन करता हूं और जिसके लिए मुझे कोई अमाउंट मिलती है तो वो टर्नओवर कहलाई जा सकती है कि नहीं. ये डिबेट कई सालों से इनफैक्ट चली आ रही है. सेल्स टैक्स और वैट का लॉ था तब भी ये डिस्प्यूट होते थे, जीएसटी में भी ये डिस्प्यूट होने ही वाले हैं. We need to understand and analyze the definition of business. Business is defined under the GST law in an inclusive manner. The definition says business includes trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, adventure, wager, or any other similar activity, whether or not it is for a pecuniary benefit. This is very important because, as I said, general understanding is that GST is a tax on businesses. Even if we look at the definition of supply, supply is defined to include a transaction which is in the course or furtherance of business. So ordinarily, as a layman, if we look at the definition of supply, we might think that if supply is something which is in the course or furtherance of business, if I am an NGO, if I am a charitable trust, I do not do a business activity and therefore I am out of the purview of the GST law. But taxing statutes are not to be understood strictly from a layman's point of view. We need to look at the statutory definitions also. So although the definition of supply says that it has to be in the course or furtherance of business, the definition of business, as I just pointed out, says that it includes trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, or any other similar activity, whether or not it is for a pecuniary benefit. So even if a transaction is in the nature of trade or a manufacture or a commerce, even though I do not have a profit motive, the definition treats it to be a business activity. So first and foremost, we need to understand that only because I do not have a profit motive, that does not strictly take me out of the purview of GST law. So ordinarily, I may not be treated to be a businessman. Ordinarily, in a layman's language, people may not consider me to be in business. Even in income tax probably might treat me to be a charitable institution under 12AA. I may not have to pay any income tax because I am a charitable institution. But for the purpose of GST law, there is a specific definition of business where it is clearly specified that any trade, whether or not in the course or for whether or not for a pecuniary benefit, that is whether or not it is for a profit motive, that will be construed as business. So now again the question is whether there is any way out from this. As I said, such definitions, such provisions were there even under the earlier law. There is a judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of Sai Publication Fund. In this case, Sai Publication Fund was a trust whose main objective was to propagate the principles of Sai Baba. In the course of achieving that object, the trust also used to sell books relating and literature relating to Sai Baba and collect consideration. Question was whether there was any liability of sales tax on these transactions. The definition of business as given under the GST law, and as I just the relevant extract which I just spoke of right now, was there even under the relevant sales tax law for consideration before the Supreme Court. Even then the Supreme Court said that we agree that profit motive is not to be looked at for deciding whether the particular transaction is a business or not. But if my main object is not business, the activities for which I am collecting consideration are only incidental to my main object, in such a scenario, there will not be a liability of sales tax. So my main object is not in the nature of business. My incidental activities are in the nature of trade. In such a scenario, the Supreme Court says that there is no liability for registration under the relevant sales tax law. In my opinion, such judgment would be applicable to GST law, with a caveat that the department will not agree, the GST authority will not agree to such a submission. Because of such a wide definition of business, it will become a matter of litigation whether your main object is in the nature of business or not, and only whether your incidental activities are business transactions or not. So according to me, the NGOs or the charitable trusts which have regular transactions of supply of goods or services, जो trust के ऐसे, I'm sorry, I'm getting messages where some are requesting for English, some in some Hindi, so I'll just try to mix both of the languages. So जो trust, जो NGO के regular transactions होते हैं regarding sale of goods or supply of services, और जहां customer या किसी third party से consideration मिलता है regularly, in such cases, such NGOs or charitable trusts, if they cross the threshold of 20 lakhs, 40 lakhs, they cannot take the risk of not taking registration and not paying tax. मेरे हिसाब से, as I said, based on precedents, if suppose I have not taken registration and if the authority comes to me and asks me why I have not taken registration, and if I have to litigate on the issue, then probably I can rely on such judgments of the Supreme Court and other high courts and say that I am not liable for registration. But this would become a matter of litigation. So according to me, for a small organization, if we don't want to enter into a controversy of such sorts, and if we are receiving consideration for our transactions, then in such circumstances, it is advisable that we take registration under the GST law and we pay the applicable tax. In fact, insofar as GST law itself is concerned, there are decisions taking the view that even charitable trusts are liable for registration under the law. One such decision recently was rendered in the case of All India Disaster Mitigation Institute. Now, this organization was only involved in giving training to people for mitigation of any disaster which may occur in future. It was a fully charitable organization, no other activity, registered under 12AA of the Income Tax Act. Even then, the GST authority takes a view that you forget everything. Ultimately, for the activity that you do, you receive consideration from the recipients. Therefore, taking into consideration the wide definition of business, we will hold you liable for registration under the GST law. In fact, this was a case where most of its contracts were with governments. अलग-अलग state government के साथ इनके contracts थे. फिर भी authority ने ऐसा view ले लिया कि भले ही जो भी है, भले ही आप charitable हो, भले ही आपका profit motive नहीं है, we accept everything. ऐसा नहीं था कि इसमें ऐसा कोई doubt किया कि ये charitable नहीं है. कोई authority ने ऐसा doubt raise नहीं किया कि ये charitable नहीं है. ये charitable है, फिर भी ये रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए लायबल है, ऐसा अथॉरिटी ने होल्ड किया है. ऑफ कोर्स, because this particular entity had not taken registration and there was requirement of litigation, therefore this particular order is challenged right now before the High Court. So the High Court may reverse the decision. It may hold that this particular organization is not liable for registration. But as non-profit organizations, we cannot afford to enter into such litigation if it is avoidable. So according to me, if there are regular transactions and if we receive consideration, then in such circumstances, it is prudent that we take registration before the authority. Now, this is the general proposition. There is an exception to this proposition because of an exemption given under the GST law for certain charitable activities. Now, if we look at this exemption, per se, again, a layman would think that everything by a 12AA trust is exempt. I'll just read out the exemption. The exemption says services by an entity registered under section 12AA of Income Tax Act 1961 by way of charitable activities. This is what the exemption reads. So someone may believe that if I am registered under 12AA of Income Tax Act, then I don't have any GST liability. That is not the fact. We need to look at the definition of charitable activities, which is defined in the same notification. So the phrase, I'll just read out that definition because that will be very relevant. The phrase charitable activities is defined in an exhaustive manner. So unlike the definition of business, as I pointed out earlier, that is an inclusive definition, although that may not be relevant to you all, that is for us lawyers, as such, this whether it is inclusive or exhaustive, etc., it is a matter of interpretation relevant for lawyers. But just for better understanding, I would point out that business definition was an inclusive definition, while charitable activities definition is an exhaustive definition. So nothing other than what is specified in the definition would be treated as charitable activities. Charitable activities is defined to mean activities relating to public health by way of care or counseling of terminally ill persons or persons with severe physical or mental disability, HIV/AIDS, persons addicted to a dependence forming substance such as narcotic drugs or alcohol, or public awareness or preventive health, family planning or prevention of HIV infection, advancement of religion, spirituality or yoga, advancement of educational programs or skill development relating to abandoned, orphaned or homeless children, physically or mentally abused and traumatized persons, prisoners or persons over the age of 65 years residing in rural areas, and preservation of environment. So these are the categories which are specified in the definition of charitable activities. If I fall in this category, then I am exempt from tax. Again, here an important caveat to be kept in mind. If you recollect the initial entry which I read out, it said services by an entity registered under section 12AA of Income Tax Act 1961 by way of charitable activities. So what is exempt is the services which are given, which are by way of charitable activities. Under the GST law, there is a distinct bifurcation between supply of goods and supply of services. So even though I may be into the activity which is enlisted in the definition of charitable activities, if I am supplying goods, then this exemption does not apply. For example, here in Gujarat, at least, there are many organizations. Suppose there is a very famous organization called Apang Manav Mandal, which is purely and exclusively dealing with care or counseling of people with physical or mental disability. So first-hand impression may be that that is part of the list covered in the definition of charitable activity, and therefore Apang Manav Mandal goes out of the purview of GST law. But Apang Manav Mandal also gets many items such as stationery, other articles made by these special children, and these items are then sold in the market, and whatever is earned is again plowed back into the trust fund. But the point is that the trust, which is engaged in care or counseling of people with physical or mental disability, also is engaged in supply of goods. Once it is engaged in the supply of goods, then it does not get covered by this list of exemption, and therefore again it would be liable to pay tax. So what is carved out from the purview of GST law is a very limited list, and that too only in respect of services. There is no exemption as such in respect of supply of goods by a charitable institution. And therefore, if and only if I am engaged solely in these activities, and that too in the nature of service, and I am not involved or not dealing with goods at all, only in such circumstances I will be specifically out of the purview of GST law, and therefore I will not be required to take registration. If suppose I have even a single transaction of goods in a year, it is important to note that the threshold of GST registration, that is 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs, takes into consideration both exempt and taxable supply. So even if 99% of my activity is exempt, if 1% of my turnover is taxable, even then I'll be required to take registration and pay tax under the GST law if my cumulative turnover exceeds the threshold limit. I may just repeat. The threshold is to be calculated on the basis of my total turnover. मेरे books of accounts के हिसाब से जो भी मेरी total sale और या total consideration है towards sale of goods or services, उसको देख के determine करना है कि whether I am liable for registration or not. अगर वो पूरा का पूरा exempt है, I don't need to take registration. उसमें से अगर थोड़ा भी part taxable है, which is not covered by the exemption, in such circumstances I will have to take registration and pay tax only on the taxable portion. ऐसा नहीं है कि I will have to pay tax on the total portion. I will have to pay tax only on the taxable portion, but I will have to take registration and undertake the necessary compliances. इसमें another practical aspect to be kept in mind. Suppose I am a charitable trust which is engaged only in these activities which are purely in the nature of charitable activities as defined under the GST law. But suppose I have certain incidental incomes. For example, I have as a trust I have a sort of an auditorium, which apart from using that auditorium for my own purpose, I also rent it out occasionally to others. That rental income would be an incidental activity which is not per se exempt from tax, and therefore because of that incidental activity also, I will get liable to get registered under the GST law. So I need to be careful. I not only am required to consider my routine activities, I also need to keep in mind my incidental activities and incidental income. If I am earning some sort of a rent, then even though my main activity may be covered under that list of charitable activities and therefore exempt from tax, but because of that incidental activity, I may have to take registration and pay tax on that incidental income. So one such incidental transaction which is common and which comes to mind is rental charges. Another is interest income, but thankfully interest income on deposits by banks, that is again exempt from tax by a specific exemption. So if I'm earning interest apart from my other charitable activities, I don't need to worry, I don't need to take registration. But if I am earning rent, then I have a problem. Again, we need to keep in mind that rent, if it is by way of, if suppose I only have a sort of a guest house, I have two rooms which I occasionally rent out for residential purpose. This is just on a hypothesis. Then again, renting for the purpose of residential use, that is exempt. So renting of an auditorium for conduct of programs, that would be taxable. Renting of a house for residential use, that would be exempt. So we need to analyze all our transactions, try and figure out whether we are engaged in any taxable activity or not. If we are, then we'll have to take registration and pay tax. If we are not, then we need not worry. But this is a very technical subject. So what my advice would be that we don't just decide all this on our own. If we are not registered till now, then we need to immediately approach a consultant and seek his advice as to whether we should take registration or not, because these are very tricky laws. Even the best of businessmen get caught in the jugglery of language. So we cannot afford to have an authority come after 2-3 years and tell us that you were liable for registration, so kindly pay tax with interest, penalty, etc. So wherever we have not yet taken registration, we need to immediately approach the concerned consultant in your area, and we need to get clarification on this aspect. As I again repeat, it is very difficult to say that charitable trusts and non-profit organizations per se will be excluded from GST purview. That although we would take such an argument before courts, but practically that would never be accepted. As I said, there are already orders of the authorities in various charitable organizations taking the view that they are liable for registration. So if suppose subsequently there are judgments and then we change our view and we don't take registration, that is a different story. But as of today, the provisions as they stand now and as the orders which have been passed by the various GST authorities, if we analyze them, merely because we are charitable organizations, we cannot afford to not take registration. If we are engaged only in charitable activities as defined in the list in the exemption notification, then probably we will not have a problem. Then we can avoid paying tax. But even there, if we have certain incidental incomes which are taxable, then we would be again drawn into this GST registration, and we'll have to take registration and pay tax on the taxable activity. Now, coming to the question of, suppose we take registration under the GST law, then what are the legal implications? What are the procedures? What are the safeguards which the trust would need to take? Suppose we take registration, as I said, apart from the list of charitable activities, we'll have to pay tax on the other transactions. one important transaction or one important component on which there will be no tax liability will be donation. It is common for charitable organizations to receive donations from various other third parties. GST law is a law which imposes tax on transactions of supply. So there has to be a quid pro quo. I supply something, someone else gives me something in return. So I sell, say, a toothpaste, and someone gives me 100 rupees towards the purchase of the toothpaste. That is a transaction of supply. I give a service of training someone, someone gives me fees of 100 rupees. That is again quid pro quo. In case of a donation, as there is nothing which I do for that person, the donor on his own gives some amount of money to a charitable organization. That donation would not be consideration for any transaction of supply, and therefore there will not be any tax liability on donations. Here, the very same thing would also apply for grants. I see a question, although we'll take questions subsequently, but donation, the principle which is applicable for donation will also be applicable for grants. If I am receiving a grant from an authority or a government or from someone else, then for that grant, I am not doing anything in return for that particular entity or for that particular government. And therefore, because there is no two-way transaction, therefore there will not be any tax liability even on grants. Just one thing we need to be careful about. Although if a simpliciter donation of say 1 lakh rupees is received, I will not have any tax liability. We should avoid quantum of or we should avoid determination of quantum of donations in a way that they are linked to specific services or specific goods. For example, many trusts would or many donors would say that you give me a list of things done or list of activities done during the period, I'll pay for the cost. In other words, the arrangement would be that you suppose give training to some people who are not in the mainstream. We take an example here in Gujarat. This what we call Gru Udyog is very famous, where women or people who are slightly of the out of the mainstream, they are made to make products by organizations, and those products are sold, consideration is received, part of the consideration is paid to women. In some cases, those products may be sold at subsidized rates. So suppose a donor comes, he says that I will not give you blanket donation. What I'll do is that whatever, suppose the actual cost of that product is 100 rupees. But you, for the purpose of promoting the activity, you are giving the products or selling the products at a subsidized rate of 50 rupees. So the donor says that don't worry, the remaining 50 rupees I will contribute by way of donation. If we enter into such an arrangement, then there will be a problem from the tax angle. Because then that would not be simpliciter donation. What the statute may construe this transaction to be is that you selling the product of 100 rupees to X person, for which X person pays you 50 rupees, the balance 50 rupees is paid by the donor. In such circumstances, there is a scope for the authority taking a view that we will not accept this amount which you received from Mr. Y as donation, that is simpliciter consideration for a transaction which you entered with X, and therefore we will tax the transaction. In fact, if we look at the definition of consideration, there is a specific clarification that it would include consideration received from third parties. So according to me, although simpliciter donations, blanket donations, there will not be a problem. But if donations are received linked to certain specific activities, then we need to be careful. Second, if we take registration, if we are entering into transactions which are liable to tax, then what is the procedure we need to adopt? First and foremost, whenever we enter into any transaction, whether it be supply of goods or supply of services, we need to issue what is called a tax invoice. The tax invoice needs to have a detailed description of the goods, the applicable rate of tax, and that tax amount needs to be separately charged. The format of the tax invoice is available in the GST rules itself. We need to issue the tax invoice in that format, and we need to charge the tax separately in that invoice. Now you may have a question that we are a charitable organization. We might not want to collect that tax from the customer. We might want to bear it from our own fund. Even if that be so, you can calculate the tax amount by doing a reverse calculation. But the law says that you need to separately show the tax. For example, as we take the earlier illustration of a good, some goods costing 100 rupees, for which you in principle decide that I want to collect only 50 rupees. If you collect only 50 rupees, you don't want to charge tax, additional tax from the customer on that 50 rupees, then you make 50 rupees as the total, do a backward calculation, calculate the tax amount, and thereafter that is how you decide derive at your net sale price. So if suppose 10 rupees is the tax amount, then you will show in your invoice basic sale price 40 rupees, GST amount 10 rupees, and total will be 50. But the law requires that you show the tax amount, applicable tax rate, and the tax amount separately in the invoice. So this is something which we need to be careful about. Even though our motives may be bona fide, but we cannot afford to breach the provisions of the law. Second is regarding the applicable rate of tax. Now, as I said, although for registration itself, you need to approach your consultant, you need to be also very careful while deciding what tax rate is applicable for a particular commodity or a particular service. Under the earlier regime, the sales tax and the value added tax regime, there was a schedule of goods and there was a schedule of goods given under the law itself, and with rates of tax given against the respective schedules. Under the earlier regime, the accepted manner of classification or the accepted test was common parlance test. So if suppose there was an entry for fruit, then fruit was to be interpreted in a way that a common man would interpret fruit. So there was not much of a difficulty. So if I look at the schedule, I search for my commodity, the way I understand that commodity, that was the basis for classification. So under the earlier era, the classification in that manner was simpler. Under the GST regime, we need to understand that the classification is based on HSN, which is a harmonized system of nomenclature which is accepted globally. So we don't need to apply logic, we don't need to apply common parlance, etc. We need to go by what is the description of that commodity which is given in HSN. That HSN will not be readily accessible by all. So again, for determination of rate of tax, we need to be very careful. We cannot go by simpliciter the language of the notification, because if you look at the provision, if suppose you buy a book on GST, and you look at the schedule of goods and services, you will find there is a description of goods mentioned. You will also find there is an HSN code mentioned. On looking at the description of goods, you may feel that my commodity fits into this description, but that may not totally be correct if you look at the relevant description in the HSN. So we cannot decide on the rate of tax simpliciter by looking at the schedule. Nowadays, doing Google search is also has become very easy, and it is also very trending right now. So if we suppose search for GST rate on a particular commodity, that particular entry might pop up. And so we may feel that, look, this is the entry, it is as clear as daylight, there can be no scope for anything else. Why ask anyone? I'll just pay tax at that particular rate. That is very risky. That should not be done in under any circumstances. Whatever product, whatever services which we are giving, there has to be a person who is well equipped with technical interpretation of the HSN, who needs to apply his mind and then decide on the rate of tax, not otherwise. So that is on the applicable rate of tax. Third, on what value should I pay tax on? I have already covered up on that donation aspect. Donations I don't need to pay tax, but I need to be careful that the donations are not linked in any manner to specific invoices. If I'm giving discounts in the course of my business, if I am a charitable organization, I don't want to earn any profits. In fact, I want to give the products at the subsidized rates. So suppose in my invoice, I say that price is rupees 100, less discount of rupees 50, and 50 rupees net I charge from the customer. In such circumstances, I am liable to pay tax only on 50 rupees, not on 100 rupees. So any discounts which are given in the ordinary course of business and which are given in the invoice itself, they are admissible deductions, and you need to pay the GST only on the net sale price. But if the discount is not given in the invoice, if suppose the discount is subsequently given, if suppose I raise an invoice of rupees 100, thereafter my customer comes to me and says that, look, I am a person who does not have the means to pay the amount, so kindly reduce the amount by some rupees. So I, being a profitable non-profit organization, I accede to his demand, and so instead of 100, I say that, okay, you pay only 70 rupees, I'll not take 30 rupees from you. First and foremost, if we suppose enter into such an arrangement, we need to issue a credit note to that person. It cannot be that we charged 100 rupees from him in the invoice. We even mentioned tax on that 100 rupees. Simply because he only pays me 70 rupees, that does not mean I am liable only on 70. My liability of tax is on the amount which is receivable from him as per the invoice. We take another example. Suppose that person does not come to me at all. He simpliciter does not pay that amount, and we waive off that amount thinking that he is a person in need, he'll not pay. We treat the amount as bad debts. If we treat that amount as bad debts, then there is no deduction under GST law. You will still have to pay tax on that 100 rupees. So the tax liability is not on the amount which you actually receive, but the amount which is receivable. Once it becomes receivable, even if it is not actually received, still you will have to pay tax. So as I said, in the invoice itself, if you say 100 minus 50 and 50 rupees net receivable, then only on 50. If in invoice you say 100, but actually you receive only say 70 rupees, still your liability remains on 100 rupees. Unless you give a specific credit note to that particular customer, and that credit note is linked to a specific invoice. So you need to give a credit note, and in the credit note mention the invoice number for which you are giving the credit. In such circumstances, you can claim that deduction and pay tax on only 70 rupees. Otherwise, you may end up paying tax even though you are not actually receiving that much of amount from your customer. Another thing we need to be careful about is, this is the general principle that you need to pay tax on the amount which is actually receivable or received. There is an exception to this principle for transactions with related parties. So suppose I am a charitable trust and I enter into any transaction with either a trustee, or suppose another trust which is managed by the same trustee. In fact, there is an entire list of what can be considered to be a related person. But broadly, what we can understand is that if they are in some manner controlled by the same entity, or they are controlled by each other, or they together are controlling another entity, in all such circumstances, they will be related parties. If it is a related party transaction, then the tax is not on what you actually charge, then the tax will be on the open fair market value of that particular goods or service. So if we are entering into any such transaction with our trustee or with some trust which is connected to us, then in such circumstances, again, we need to be careful while we are determining the value of our supply. Next, we also need to be careful about the e-way bill provisions, because there may be some trusts who would require transport of goods from one place to another. So we need to keep in mind that if we are transporting goods from one place to another, if the value of the consignment is exceeding 50,000 rupees, barring certain exceptions, we need to generate an e-way bill on the portal. So apart from the invoice, we need to have an e-way bill, and both the invoice and e-way bill need to be given to the driver of the vehicle. So if at all in between, if the GST authority stops the vehicle and asks for the documents, then that particular driver needs to have the invoice as well as this e-way bill. There are certain exceptions to this e-way bill provision, but what we ordinarily advise is that we should not get into those exceptions. Ultimately, if we are moving the goods, then we should generate e-way bill. Ultimately, it is only a procedural formality. There is no tax liability as such because of generation of e-way bill. Now, coming to another very important component of the GST law, which would again be relevant for all SSEs, including charitable trusts, which is input tax credit. Now, suppose we take registration under the law, we are making taxable supplies. Our tax liability will get reduced to the extent we have paid tax on our inputs, input services, or capital goods. So suppose I am a charitable organization who is getting some things manufactured from a particular class of people, and I am selling those commodities. Then while I will be liable to pay tax on the sale value of those commodities, I will also be eligible for input tax credit of the tax which I pay on my inputs or input services. That is, if suppose the commodity which I manufacture is, say, papad. For manufacture of papad, I purchase flour from the open market. Whatever tax which I pay on that flour to my vendor, so that tax will not be paid to the government. That tax will on my inputs I'll be paying to my vendor. But whatever tax which I pay to my vendor, I will get input tax credit of that tax. And so to that extent, I'll have to deposit less tax with the government. For example, I make a sale transaction of, again, I'll take an example of 100 rupees, on which I collect tax of 10 rupees. But if on the floor which I purchased, I already paid 5 rupees of GST, then I will get a set off of that 5 rupees while I am depositing the tax. So I'll have to actually deposit only 5 rupees of tax. So input tax credit is also something which we need to take note of. Input tax credit is admissible of any goods or services which are used in the course or furtherance of business, subject to certain statutory exclusions. So anything which is used in the course or furtherance of business, I can get input tax credit. So it is not restricted to only my raw materials. If suppose I have an office and I have purchased certain stationery, if on stationery also my vendor has charged certain tax, because that stationery is used in the course of my business activity, therefore I will be entitled to take tax credit of the tax which I have paid on stationery. Suppose I am operating from a rented premises. My my landlord, he charges rent and he also charges GST on that rent. I will be eligible for tax credit of the GST which is charged on that rent. So tax credit is again a beneficial provision. It will reduce my tax liability to that extent. The tax credit is admissible provided I have a tax invoice with me wherein tax is separately charged. So I need to ensure, suppose it is a rent agreement. There it is very normal that because it is a rent agreement, ordinarily in commercial sense, the landlord will not be raising tax invoice. But if I want to avail the input tax credit of the GST which he charges, I'll have to insist for a tax invoice from him apart from the rent agreement. In that tax invoice, tax needs to be separately charged, and I should have actually received the goods or services for the purpose of claiming that input tax credit. We also need to be careful because right now there are a lot of scams going on where what happens is that we may purchase the goods from X person who may be a trader. That X person, although he sells the goods to us, although he charges tax in the tax invoice, he in some manner does not actually deposit that tax with the government. Then there is a provision which says that if this happens, then you will not be entitled to input tax credit. So we need to be careful that we purchase the goods, we take services only from reputed organizations, reputed institutions who are not likely to make such defaults. Because if they do, then we will be the sufferers. So ordinarily, I am entitled to input tax credit on all the goods and services which are used in the course or furtherance of business. As I said, there are certain statutory exclusions. So we cannot again go on any presumptions. We need to be aware of all the legal provisions before taking a call whether I am entitled to input tax credit or not. For example, if I own a motor vehicle, if the motor vehicle is owned in the name of the trust, if the motor vehicle is used by the trust in its course of its activity, still there is a statutory exclusion which says that you are not entitled to input tax credit on motor vehicles subject to certain exceptions. So suppose if the trust is owning a truck, if it is used in transportation of goods, then I am entitled to input tax credit. But if the trust is owning a car, where the trustee or his employees use that car in the course of their activities, then for that car, there is no input tax credit. Similarly, for food and beverages, there is no input tax credit. So suppose if the employees or the trustee in the course of his activity purchases certain food and beverages, goes out to a restaurant and takes a meal or two, and GST is charged in that invoice, there is no input tax credit for such food and beverages. So again, this is not the domain of businessmen or NGOs or charitable trusts. Just like rate of tax, whether I am entitled to input tax credit or not, it should be better left to the consultant, and he should be the one who should be guiding you as to which are the transactions on which you can claim input tax credit and which are the transactions on which you cannot. As NGOs or as charitable trusts, we just need to be broadly aware of these provisions. So it may not happen that unnecessarily we let go of some credit which is actually admissible to us, and it should also not happen that we claim some credit which is not admissible to us. So this was about a broad idea of input tax credit. And now, what is the procedure, or what is the procedural compliance which needs to be done? All people, all taxable persons who are registered under the GST law need to file monthly returns, apart from or other than certain classes which need to file quarterly returns. But generally, if you are registered under the GST law, you need to file monthly returns. There are two forms. One is GSTR1, one is GSTR3B, which you need to file on a monthly basis. And thereafter, you also need to file an annual return. So that is the procedural part. Another important provision to be kept in mind is a provision for what is called composition scheme. So now, for entities who are having turnover less than 75 lakhs, which is the threshold right now, there is a scheme which is called a composition scheme which is available, which is subject to some conditions. But if you opt for that scheme, then rather than going into all these aspects of applicable rate of tax and input tax credit, etc., you can simply sit or pay a lump sum tax at the specified rate on your total turnover. So you don't need to enter into all these hassles. If you are a small entity having turnover less than 75 lakhs, then you can opt for this composition scheme and you can simply sit or pay that lump sum tax rate, and that would be the end of the matter. Of course, as I said, this is subject to certain conditions. Primarily, this scheme is available for people who are dealing in goods. Your services component cannot exceed 10% of your total turnover if you want to be eligible for this composition. Secondly, you must not be dealing in any interstate transactions, etc. So you need to just see whether you are qualifying in that criteria or not. But if you are qualifying, then it is a good scheme, and rather than getting into all these procedural hassles, it is better to opt for this composition. Now, apart from this exemption for charitable activities, we also need to have a slight idea of certain other exemptions which would also be, which may be available to us. So we may not be qualifying as a charitable activity, but there are certain other exemptions which might be available to us, because of which we may not have any liability of tax. So I'll just give a couple of illustrations. One is healthcare services. Healthcare services by any hospital, by any doctor, is not liable to GST. So whether you are charitable or not, that does not matter. If what you are providing is healthcare services, then there is no liability of GST. So that is something which we need to keep in mind, that although I had said earlier that charitable organizations per se will not be out of the purview of the GST law, but if suppose the transactions which they undertake, the transactions themselves are not liable to tax because of some separate exemption, then again they'll be out of the purview of GST law. Another such example can be of educational institutions. If it is an educational institution which is giving education and which is giving services to students or a faculty or a staff member, then in such circumstances, such educational institution is also exempt from tax. So whether it is charitable or not, again, that is not important. The exemption which is given is qua the nature of the activity which is undertaken by the institution. So if I am qualifying as an educational institution, again, we need to look at the specific definition of educational institution. But broadly, any educational institution which is giving or which is part of an approved course which is which enables a student to get an approved qualification, that would be treated to be an educational institution. So your private coaching class would not be an educational institution, but your school, your college, some institution which is directly affiliated with a recognized university, those would be educational institutions. And if they charge fees from their students, those fees would not be taxable under the GST law. And these are only a couple of illustrations. We need to analyze other specific provisions before we decide on the tax liability of specific institutions. As I said, all these are very complex provisions. It is not very easy to understand the tax implication and the tax effect of these provisions as a layman. Therefore, another provision which we also need to keep in mind is something called an advance ruling. So suppose we have a doubt as to whether my activity qualifies under this head of charitable activity or healthcare service or educational institution, etc. Then the government gives a facility of filing an application for advance ruling. Once we file an application for advance ruling, the authorities themselves will apply their mind and give you their opinion as to whether you are liable for registration or whether you are liable to pay tax or not. If suppose they give an opinion that you are not liable for registration, you are not liable to pay tax, then you can sit back and relax, and then there cannot be any further hassle from the authority, because the law itself says that the advance ruling authority will be binding not only on you, it will also be binding on the authority. So if in case of any such doubts, it is advisable that you prefer an advance ruling application. Whatever the advance ruling authority says, we abide by the order, and then we don't have any further issues in the matter. If we are not agreeable to the advance ruling, of course, there are remedies of appeal, etc. But at least we can have peace of mind that what we are doing is approved by the authority itself, so that there may not be any future consequences insofar as our activities are concerned. So all in all, this was a broad idea of how the GST law will apply and what are the basic safeguards and procedures to be followed by more particularly a charitable organization or an NGO. Now I believe we can open up for question and answers, and then we can close the session.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your nice and lucid interpretation of various the technical definition given under the GST. Now coming to the question and answers, the one question is from AK Sethi. Sir, I have paid GST on my supply. Can I get the refund of the amount when I file ITR? Second question, I have done the supply against the government tender, GST charge, GST out and GST input. Can I get the refund on difference between ITR?
Can we just take it one at a time, please?
Yeah, one question is, sir, I have paid GST on my supply. Can I get refund of the amount when I file ITR?
No. So there is no question of getting refund while once I have paid that GST. Income tax and GST are absolutely separate laws. Once I become liable for tax under GST, unless there is a provision for refund under the GST law, there is no question of you getting any refund. Insofar as GST law is concerned, for output tax liability, the only way in which you can get refund is if you are exporting the goods or supplying to an SEZ unit. So apart from these two transactions, there are no other transactions for which there is a provision for refund. So there is no question of you getting refund of tax when you file your income tax return.
Okay, sir, there are three things very important for the operation of NGO. One is the grant, government grant. Second one is funding from corporate under CSR. And the third one is funding from under FCRA, foreign fund. So in these cases, what is the applicability of GST, whether it is exempted or what is the procedures?
No, so as I said, ultimately for GST liability, there needs to be a two-way transaction. There needs to be supply from your end and consideration in response to that supply. Now, insofar as these grants are concerned, per se there will not be any supply from your end. The government or the private authority or the private company would be simply giving you an amount of money. Even if we look at CSR, ultimately the company will, towards fulfillment of its corporate social responsibility, it will be giving an amount to an NGO. That is only a transaction in money. There is no supply which took place from you to the company or from you to the government. And in such circumstances, there is no tax liability under GST law on the amount so received. The only caveat which I put here is what I have already explained. Ideally, it should not be linked to specific transactions. If it is linked to specific transactions, in the sense that if the company says that you give me a list of your goods and the price you have charged, and I will give you X amount per transaction, etc., such arrangements you should avoid. At best, what you should negotiate with the company is that we will give you a broad idea of the total expense which we are likely to incur. Kindly give the grant or kindly give the amount based on that broad statement. Kindly don't link the amounts to specific transactions. Otherwise, there cannot be any tax liability on donations, grants, etc.
Okay, sir. Now there are certain questions like we have got sponsored program and also paid program under the NSDC. PMKK, can we go for a composition GST scheme? Sundra Raman asked the question, sir. They are NSDC partner and they are running the Pradhan Mantri Kaushalya Kendra. So they can get the benefit of composition scheme.
No, but that would again depend on first the turnover, secondly what is their activity. As I said, essentially it is available to people who are engaged only in mainly supply of goods. The service component cannot exceed 10% of my total turnover. So if the turnover threshold is less than 75 lakhs, and if the turnover of goods is greater than 90% of their total turnover, only then they can get the benefit of that composition scheme.
We are a Section 8 company and providing the service in sexual healthcare services, whether applicable for GST. Additionally, we are receiving fund as a consultancy income, would applicable for GST? Mr. Roy asked the questions.
But so see, for specific activity, I'll need the description of the exact activity which you are undertaking. So what is the exact activity, what and how you charge, from whom you charge, that I'll need a clarification. Insofar as consulting income is concerned, again, I feel that that would not get covered by any of that exemption list of charitable activity, because ultimately it would be in the nature of consultancy service, unless it is unless you are giving consultancy to that to terminally ill persons or persons with severe physical mental ability, etc., and you are charging from those persons, that is a different thing. But for me to answer such specific questions for specific activities, I'll need a detailed description of that activity. Otherwise, it will be risky for the person who is asking also. It is not, if it is a general query, then it is fine. But for specific activity, whether it is taxable or not, I'll need a greater clarification on the transaction.
Sir, there is one particular mix in the market, when any NGO get a registration under GST, is there any effect on 12-way registrations?
No, that is out of question. As I said, 12AA under Income Tax Act and GST law as such are completely separate. Even if I opt for GST registration, that does not mean that I cease to be charitable and that I cease to be a 12AA institute under income tax. In fact, if that is something which I had pointed out, GST law, the exemption entry says that the 12AA persons giving charitable services will be exempt, but only to the extent of the list which is there in GST. So the GST law recognizes 12AA exemption to a limited extent. But that does not mean that if I am engaged in certain activities which are not part of that list under GST law, that does not mean that I cease to be 12AA under the Income Tax Act. So that is absolutely a myth, that this GST exemption or registration has nothing to do with 12AA registration under Income Tax Act. Even if you take registration under GST, you can continue to claim exemption under the Income Tax Act.
Sir, Mr. Hiren Patel asked the questions. GST on educational services, as you said, it is completely exempted. But is there any terms or any specific things they need to mention? Like sometimes coaching is also there. So coaching will be exempted or what, sir?
No, so as I said, if it is in the nature of private coaching, then it will not be exempt. If the institution is affiliated to a recognized university, and which is if the institution is giving education pursuant to that affiliation, or if it is imparting training towards an approved vocational course, only then the institution will be exempt from tax. If it is a private coaching center, then there will not be any exemption.
Sir, very general question, sir. In what situations charitable institutions or NGO need to register under GST? Sir, can you explain a little bit on this part? Because NGOs are also doing a charitable activities. They may have certain asset. So in what situation they need to apply for GST registrations?
So as I already said, ultimately you need to look at your books of accounts, and you need to find out from the various sources of your consideration. If you are only operating on the basis of donations and grants, there should not be a problem. But if you are collecting consideration from the recipient of your goods or services, and if the threshold of and if the quantum of that consideration is exceeding the threshold limit as specified under the GST law, then you will become liable for registration, unless all the activities are covered by that list of charitable activities or some other exemption. The exemption from registration can be in two circumstances. One, if I am not engaged in any business activity. Two, if all my activities are exempt from tax. So I need to analyze my books of accounts, and I need to single out each and every transaction, and I need to find out whether I am entering into any transaction which is taxable or not. If it is, if any one transaction is also taxable, but if my total consideration is exceeding the threshold limit, then I need to take registration and pay tax on that one transaction. So basically it will depend on what transactions I have undertaken and what are the sources from which I am earning my income.
The one question is, sir, we are working in the project funded by European Union in the consortium of 4 NGOs. Activities and allocation of money is separated for 4 partner NGO. We are not giving services to each other. Question is, can the lead NGO who receive the money from EU on behalf of consortium deduct the tax and give us the money to partners?
No, see, ultimately, if it is a consortium agreement and only facilitating the transfer of money if the lead NGO is receiving the amount and then dispersing the amounts to the different NGOs, that would not be a supply transaction. Ultimately, as I said, the levy of GST is only on a transaction of supply. Here what is happening is that 4 people are getting together and entering into an agreement with the European Union entity, and they are receiving funds from that entity. So per se there is no supply. Even inter se, for facilitating the transfer of money from abroad, probably the foreign entity is giving the money only to a single entity, and the single entity is then disbursing the amounts to others. The entire arrangement, nowhere I see a transaction of supply. So if there is no transaction of supply, then there cannot be any tax liability on the transaction.
Sir, I think you have clearly mentioned that, I mean, any entity that they are offering the charitable services and additional services, which is taxable in nature, that they have to take the GST registration. But the question is related to educational institutions. There is one is a university and one is an affiliated educational institute. So they are running the mess, canteen, and running the hostel, and they have auditorium, guest houses. So they need to take a tax on all these services, sir.
No, so the exemption is only for a supply of service by the educational institution to its students, faculty, and staff. So any sort of service by the institution to its students, faculty, or staff, that would be exempt from tax. But if suppose in the canteen there is no such bifurcation, the canteen is an open canteen, even others can come in and buy the food, etc. Suppose in the auditorium also, the auditorium is also rented out to others for other programs. In such circumstances, that exemption would not apply. So basically, the exemption is for any sort of service which is given to its students or faculty members. For other ancillary transactions, there will be a tax liability. And for this, in many cases, for such canteens, for practical purposes, it may be difficult to prove that I am only giving it to my students. If it is located in such an area where outsiders also come and eat, then in such circumstances, if we are not able to prove that as a fact, then we should not take that risk. Then we should charge and pay the tax. If we are able to establish that it is only for our students and our faculty members, only then we can think of not paying tax. But again, it should be owned by us. So it should not be that the canteen is operated by a contractor. That will again be a different situation. Then it will be a transaction by the contractor to the educational institution, for which there is a separate exemption. But again, that exemption is conditional. So we also need to be careful that if we ourselves are operating the canteen, that is a different aspect. If we are giving the canteen to a contractor for operation, then that will be a different transaction.
So thank you, sir. I think most of the question that you have answered. Now the last question, sir, that is we take from Mr. Roy. The receiving fund as a deliverable based contract and getting a fund as a reimbursement after completing the deliverables, whether it comes under the purview of GST.
As I said here, there will be a problem because the fund is based on deliverables. The authority can very well say that ultimately this is not a sort of a donation. It is only consideration flowing from X for a transaction which is done with Y. So here we cannot on our own take the risk of not paying tax. At the most, we can apply for advance ruling and seek the opinion of the authority. So as I said, wherever we find it is a sort of a gray area where we don't exactly know whether we are fitting into the exemption or taxation, then we should apply for advance ruling, and we should operate only after we receive the order of the advance ruling authority.
Thank you, sir, for your nice interpretations and giving the question answers. And now Rina put the feedback forms. Now, sir, there are some participants asked, is there any particular book, that you will refer to the participant for further reading? Because I think one session is not enough to have the fair understanding about GST. So, sir, would you like to recommend your books or maybe the books for
Mostly the books in the market would be generally general books, which would be focused more on business transactions, would not be entirely relevant to everyone. So I don't believe there is any specific book for NGOs or charitable organizations. If that be so, I'll let you know. Otherwise, offhand, I don't believe there is any such specific book as of now. But what I feel is that rather than doing this on your own, if you have a substantial transaction base, then it is advisable that you get in touch with a consultant and do your transactions only thereafter, because this is not a law which can be easily interpreted by the layman. In fact, right now, because it is new, even the authorities, the businessmen, and the courts are finding it difficult to interpret it. So it has a lot of complexities. Because it is new, there are no settled decisions as yet on its interpretation. Like for 12AA income tax, because it has been there since more than 50 years, now there are a lot of judgments. So everyone is clear more or less on how the section operates, which is not the case insofar as GST law is concerned. So rather than, of course, it is always good to be well versed with the subject, but what I would say is that if we are engaged in voluminous transactions, then it is always better to take technical advice before proceeding further.
So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving the guidance on behalf of all the non-profit community, social sector leaders. I extend my deepest thanks to you, sir, for giving your consent and sparing your time with us. It is a very the informative sessions wherein you have given the lots of technical understanding in a simplest language. Sir, thank you so much. Any concluding remarks you would like to share about GST and charitable business in terms of carrying or in terms of the operation of their business?
The only advice I would say is that do not take it lightly, because the law is very stringent in that manner. There are very grave consequences for breach. So we cannot afford to take the law lightly, or we cannot afford to transact based on presumptions or what we hear from the market. That is the biggest mistake that people make, that they based on what they hear from their competitors, they sort of plan their tax liabilities accordingly, which according to me is not the correct approach. We need to be more individual based. So for each entity, that act will have different application, different connotations. So each entity needs to take its own call as to how it is applicable and to what extent the law is applicable. That is all.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sir your guidance. Sir, any contacts or any Twitter handle or anything that you can share to the participant? They may be in a further touch with you, sir. For your contacts.
Sorry.
For further contact, if any organization wanted to take your advice or your services, can you share your contact, your email ID or?
Yeah, sure. I just put it on the chat.
Yes, sir, please.
Email ID.
Yeah, sure, sir. Now, thank you all participants who joined today morning, and we really enjoyed the discussions. And with this note, we would like to end the session over here. Again, the one request is we have already shared the feedback link. You share your feedbacks about the programs and the questions. So question, if we receive, we will share to the sir. So thank you once again. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Namaste.